Hello, everyone. How quickly we've come to the fifth and final day of the 43rd Annual ODU Literary Festival. Welcome to those of you in our virtual theater on Zoom and on Facebook. I'm Katherine Jackson, and I've had the honor and pleasure of co-directing this year's festival with my colleague in the English department, Virginia Poet Laureate Louisa Igloria, who has brought wisdom and energy to the planning and delivery of these events. Thank you, Louisa, for being such a generous partner. We hope that you've had an opportunity to listen to some of the writers who've addressed our theme of grit and grace in the past few days. They've helped us to see that hope can be found even in the darkest days. In that spirit, I invoke a Navajo saying from a poem that Jake Skeets read for us yesterday. From here, there will be beauty again. Those of you who've been at our previous events know that we have a long list of people to be thanked. Of course, that's because a festival of this scale takes many hands, including many behind-the-scenes people, and we thank all of them now. In addition, we offer thanks for their technical expertise and calming stage management to Karen Meyer, Sun Win, Christina LaPuma, Emily Poulin, Ashley Johnson, Ebony Drayton, and Lex Park, our new friends in the Office of Community Engagement. As Karen has often said, despite all the ugliness of COVID, it also has brought opportunities, and we couldn't agree with her more. We also thank Karen Vaughn of the ODU Perry Library, who will archive recordings of these events, as she has for festivals in the past. Mark Katz of the University Village Bookstore, who's made books by festival writers available in store and on the website. And Tracy Rice Weber, graduate assistant to the Creative Writing Program. Thank you all. Gabriella Agloria created the beautiful watercolor illustration for our brochure, and Shara Weber provided the design for all of our promotional materials. Thanks to you as well. We also thank our supporters and sponsors, College of Arts and Letters Dean Kent Sandstrom and members of his staff, Executive Director for the Arts Cullen Strawn, the Norfolk Commission on the Arts and Humanities, the Edie and Forrest P. White Endowment, Kathleen Rhodes and the Gay Cultural Studies Program, Dr. Jennifer Fish and the Department of Women's Studies, and Michael Candelwall and the Muse Writers Center. We're especially grateful today to Associate Vice President for Regional Higher Education Centers, Renee Olander, for sponsoring this program. Renee has been an ardent supporter of the Literary Festival and has hosted many festival events at ODU Virginia Beach in the past. When it became clear that the festival would not be possible face-to-face, Renee was quick to jump on to the virtual festival. Her staff members, including Linda Calkins and Benny Alviera, also provided support for today's program. Thank you for making this event possible. Renee will join me and Louisa for a question and answer period at the end of the reading. If you have a question for our speaker, please type it into the QA box, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Now, Renetta Van Indenburg, a student in ODU's Creative Writing Program, will introduce our reader.
Hello. This literary festival is a celebration of artistic risk-taking and achievement, both which describe the versatile author I have the honor of introducing. Suzanne Strempek Shea's novels are hailed as significant contributions to Polonian literature, as well as for their strong contemporary place setting and female protagonist. She has published in fiction, nonfiction memoir with poetic titles that suggest her lyrical yet succinct writing styles, Selling the Light of Heaven and Hoopy Shoopy Donna. One reviewer noted that her novels give us a window into the warmth and humor of Polish-American life. Shea has opened more windows than those of her Western Massachusetts hometown, windows on a myriad of vistas, including personal accounts of medical challenges, the treatment of animals, and the earth. The motto of Old Dominion University's writing program is, "Where great writers of the future connect with great writers of our time." She certainly fits the bill as a great writer of our time. Please join me in welcoming Suzanne. Suzanne, please turn on your video and microphone. Thank you.
Renetta, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I'm so honored to be here today. I thank you for Renetta. It was wonderful in the preparation for today and thinking way back to a time before we're existing in right now that is so difficult. Renee Olander approached me to speak in person, and I was very excited. I'm speaking to you from up in Massachusetts, and I would be down there with you if it weren't for a few other events we're all going through. So I'm so appreciative to how everything has come up together and the ease with which this is being delivered to me here in my little office library here. And so I'm very grateful to anyone who's watching today, to all of you here on campus. Special thanks to Luisa Igloria and Catherine Jackson for co-directing this event. To my very dear friend, again, Renee Olander, graceful and gritty wordsmith, and just a dear soul, Lex and Ashley, who've been helping also here behind the scenes. And I want to especially thank Mark Katz too in the bookstore. As you'll go on to learn, I have special affinity for bookstores. So I am, as I said, writing to or speaking to you. I was thinking writing, speaking to you here from my home in Western Massachusetts. And because I am here, I can more easily grab all the show and tells I love to show and tell when I'm speaking. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of how I got into my writing, which does range around a lot of topics. And along the way, I hope to perhaps spark something in you that you might want to do for the world that's around you. That's what one thing I found that I can do with my writing is certainly first and foremost, I enjoy the process, but then what can I enlighten others about? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, how that came to be. And again, thank you for being here. If no one were interested in my work, reading my work, I wouldn't get to do this for a living. But what I thought I would do for a living when I was growing up about 3 miles down the road from here is this. I thought I would be a cowgirl. I thought that I would have a yard full of horses, big farm, and basically walked around. Can't see the boots in this photo, but I walked around in this outfit whenever I didn't have my parochial school uniform on, and I had white boots. And my sister would say, "Would you make her take that off?" But my parents, God love them, said, "No, you know, like that's what she's doing. It makes her happy." And that's been a great lesson for me, because when I was doing things like writing a newspaper called The Nutty News when I was 10, my parents would go out every Saturday night here in very Polish Catholic America, where I was raised and where my parents came from. All my grandparents come from Poland. When I was being brought up, my parents every Saturday night would go polka dancing, and my sister and I would walk down the 13 steps to my Jaju and Babci's, my maternal grandparents downstairs. And while we were watching any kind of TV that was coming on, I think it was like Get Smart and such, we had to be doing something. We had the TV on, but we had to be doing something. And my sister would be sewing, she'd be drawing, and I would be writing the Nutty News. And it had things like being here in Massachusetts, I had Carl Yastrzemski turning president. So not only did I write the things, I also illustrated. So, but the great thing about this is that the next day when my sister and I went back upstairs to get ready for church on that Sunday morning, my parents would say, "Hey, the Nutty News is here." They wouldn't say, because I would go and actually leave it at the back door for them when they would find it when they would come home from dancing. And they wouldn't say, "What the heck is this? This doesn't look like Carl Yastrzemski. You spelled his name wrong." None of that. They would say, "Isn't it great? We got a newspaper. We hope we get a Nutty News next week." And these weren't parents who were raised by Dr. Spock. They weren't off reading books all the time about being parents. They were just nice people. My mom was what you would have called a homemaker then. Her job outside the home when I was a kid for 1 year, she filled in as the driver of the bookmobile here in my town of Palmer, Massachusetts. And that was so exciting and really got me into an environment that I love. Also, my dad worked at the Uniworld Tire Factory about half an hour from here in Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts, where he's from. And so it wasn't like I'm sprung from Shakespeare, but what I want to just stress today is that you don't know what you can do until you try. And that's a quote of my mom's, and I always say that because, again, I thought I'd be doing this, and I still do a version of that. I hang around with a lot of horses and probably will do so later in the day today. But you know, what I'm doing now is something I love. I get to get up here, come back downstairs in the same house where I'm sleeping, and I have my little office. I'm doing my work here. I do some teaching. I create literary events. I create some literary programs. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want to just tell you how I fell into all this. So my parents encouraged me, you know, anything creative I was doing. I actually went to school for photography because my mom was in her, sometimes on Saturdays in her spare time, she would shoot weddings for our local wedding photographer, and I would go along, and I just got enthralled by all that. But I also got enthralled by writing, and that was in high school. I complained to the town paper that they weren't covering the high school hockey team that I loved. They said, "Why don't you write the stories?" I began to do that. I got my foot in the door at the city paper near here in Springfield, Massachusetts, because I wrote a fellow there who wasn't writing about my team either. I wrote him a nasty letter. And it pays to complain because that guy said, "Hey, come sit in the press box with me. I'm sorry, I'll give more attention to the team that you love. And how about, you know, would you like a part-time job? Maybe I could help you out getting a job at the paper." So all that wonderful stuff happened. And 10 years later, we got married. And it's 36 years now that I'm married to Tommy Shea, who normally, he's not here today, but he'd be sitting on the other side of this little like 4-foot-long desk that I'm at, and we write together, and it's wonderful. So it's you know, we're both former journalists. That's what I fell into. I went to art school for photography, was working at the paper in Springfield in my spare time and on my summer vacations, and was offered a full-time job when I left art school. So I became a journalist, and I loved it. I loved what Pete Hamill says about it, about writing in general, is that we're you know, everyone's sitting around a fire in the forest, and the writer is the person who gets up from the fire and runs into the forest and sees what's that noise going on in there, and comes back and tells everybody what's going on in the forest. And so that's what we as writers do, is that, you know, all right, something's going on there. I'm going to go out and find out and come back and tell you. Now, I didn't start out on my own writing in nonfiction. I did tons of it for the Springfield newspapers, for the Providence Journal, and I did a lot of freelance along the way, which I still do some of. But my first book was basically a short story that got really long. It's called Selling the Light of Heaven, and it's about a woman who sells her engagement ring when her fiance leaves her for the priesthood. Now, it's nothing that happened to me, I have to say, but I knew a guy who was going into the priesthood later in life. And I thought, you know, like, wow, that'd be something to write about, like somebody who's left for a guy who goes and does this. And so I thought I'd write like 12 pages. And it got to be book length. I saw no end in sight, and that did become my first book with the help of a mentor I met named Eleanor Lipman, who was a wonderful, wonderful fiction writer and nonfiction writer. And I'm going to read to you a little bit from this because this is set right here in my town. What I was doing when I was writing fiction, which I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Again, I'd studied photography, and I knew journalism from my, you know, my summer job, chipping away at it for 4 years. But fiction, I just said, you know, be fun to kind of make stuff up. And so I looked out the window and I saw my very Polish Catholic, Polish American hometown. And I kind of knew like a lot of people who were driving past. And I thought, I'm going to set something here. So this tells you a little bit about where I'm from. There was a good chance that anyone again, this is fiction, but said here, there was a good chance that anyone who went to my church would see me again, that they would have seen me from just about the third or fourth week of my life. I was born on a Sunday, and my mother would have brought me to church on the next one had Trisha Plattner from down the street not coughed on me and given me pneumonia on my first day home. In some people's opinion, I got the next best thing to going to church at age 7 days, though, when I got so sick, I had to get the last rites 4 days after I was born, even before I got around to being formally baptized. When I got older and learned the map of the great beyond, how the top layer of heaven rests on the middle layer of purgatory, which sits on the thin layer of limbo, which is kept warm atop hell, I realized how close I had come to being an unbaptized baby, dead of pneumonia, and doing the limbo forever. But I lived and left the hospital not for the faux brick-faced Vajohas funeral home, but for the white clapboard farmhouse in which I would lead a very protected life as a sickly child of Edna and Stanislaus, two Polish immigrants who loved polka music and, I sometimes suspected, though to the naked eye there was no way of being absolutely sure, each other. They met in 1953, then both recent immigrants brought by their respective relatives to the Friday night dance at the Polish home in Chicopee. Tall, skinny, and fair-haired Stanislaus asked short, plump, and ashen-haired Edna to dance to Jak szybko mijają chwile, How Quickly Time Flies, which my mother since has held as her favorite song, one of her few bows to romanticism. I once took her on a bus trip to a dinner theater where she asked a wandering violinist if he knew the tune. I love it so much, I want it played at my funeral, she told him. Why can't I play it now, he suggested, raising his bow, while you can still hear it. So I'm going to pick out of there, basically, yeah, this is where my church is up, no longer formally attend, but the church where my grandparents got married, my parents got married, Tommy and I got married, is smack dead a mile from here, up the street next to the parochial school where I attended for 8 years. I was very involved in that church, and we have a Polish funeral home, as they call it here in town. Jak szybko mijają chwile is my mom's favorite song, and they did meet in the Polish home in Chicopee. So I'm dropping little things in here as I'm having fun writing what I think will be a short story that becomes my first book. But my first book, because it was set in Polish America, in a Polish Catholic culture that wasn't getting a lot of attention in our American fiction world, I got a lot of attention for the book, and some pretty amazing things happened. I ended up on the Today Show while someone was watching the Today Show from out in California. She stopped drying her hair just at the point where she heard me explain the plot of the story about the wedding ring being sold because someone had gone off to the seminary. And the movie rights were bought, and all this other magical things happened. And one of them is that I got another offer from my publisher to write another couple of books. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to leave the newspaper for a year, and I'm going to do my best to write and promote, and then I'll see you in another year. And that was 1995, and I never went back. I loved my job. I loved doing the thing Pete Hamill talks about going out and finding out what the noise is in our community, in our woods, coming back and telling people in words on the page. But I just got caught up in all this. And one thing that grabbed me was the possibility of what this writing could be. So I was sailing along writing fiction set in my town, and I have a bunch of them here. I wrote 4 novels set here and was working on my 5th when something happened to me that opened my eyes to the power of nonfiction, personal stories, to nonfiction that could inform about causes I cared about. And that was, I was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 41. I had no history in my family. I thought I led a very healthy life. I did all the things, check all the boxes and this and that, but what's going to happen is what's going to happen. And that happened. And I, for the first time ever, kept a journal. And I had not kept a journal when I was a kid because I had an older sister, and I thought, really, she's going to be reading this. And I had one journal and I was 9 years old, and I thought, I don't know what I thought was I going to be writing that I was smoking in there or whatever, that she was going to tell my parents. I don't know, but I said, I really can't write in this because she's going to tell on me. So I never kept a journal. But when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I went through surgery, and then I got my assignment of treatments, which included a radiation therapy. And on the first day that I came back from radiation, I hadn't gone with anybody. My husband wanted to go, my friends wanted to take me. And I said, no, you know what? I want to be a tough patient. I don't want to have to rely on anybody. I want to do this myself. And I came back, and Tommy was sitting here writing, and he turned and he said, how did it go? And I said, wait a second. And I sat down and I had to write for 30 minutes. It just turned out to be 30 minutes. And then I could talk to him. Then I could tell him what happened. But before that, I could not, because I just felt like I wanted to get it out of myself. And what happened was, rather than the 5th novel that I was working on at the time, which eventually did come out, about a palm reader, totally different subject, my journal became this book, Songs from a Lead-Lined Room, and its notes high and low from my journey through breast cancer. And what I did in here is compile all my journal entries. I'm going to read to you the first day. So this is 6.5 weeks worth of daily journal entries. And this is the very first one. This is a form of the one that I wrote that first day. My new guru has an office on a deep down floor of the big hospital. The walls here are yards thick, and they are lined fat with lead. There is bad stuff being dealt with here, and it needs to be contained. Not just the danger that people who come here are carrying inside themselves, but also the things that are aimed at them down here to try to kill that danger. Everything here is bad, even the radio reception. Only one station can be caught through the fortress walls, and it's lousy. Lion King, Disco Revival. The guru's room is the size of a car, a budget rental, 2 chairs and a shelf for a desk. Today, she has offered me the option of having our session observed by an intern. This hospital is a teaching place, so at least one student in on an appointment or an exam or procedure is not uncommon. Since late winter, in the name of education, dozens of strange hands have been placed on one of my more private areas. I get probed and then thanked, and then later they'd see me in the hall with my clothes on and they wouldn't even nod a greeting, kind of like high school. The weird thing about today is that it seems odder to have a stranger in on the listening than the touching, but I don't mind. I feel bad in my soul, and at this point I might say yes to even a live telecast. The intern's name is Holly. It's bright and of course holiday-ish. Holly wants to become a nurse and is attending Springfield College, so I compliment her because that is a fine school. She smiles from a face that belongs on a good-looking religious statue, clear and open and ready for your prayers. And I wonder, in years to come, will she turn out to be the kind of nurse who held my hand an hour past the end of her shift, even though she really needed to get to the grocery store? Or will she get burned out and hateful like the ones who shouted at me the time I asked again for a painkiller? You can't tell these things in advance about how Holly or anybody might act in time. But for now, she shows every sign of being the type of nurse you'd want, interested, leaning in, and not getting in the way of my guru, Wendy, who knows what to say and when to shut up. And Wendy was a great experience during this time. She was a social worker to whom I was assigned to have regular sessions of just kind of doing what I was doing on the page, just kind of letting out what I was feeling at the time, what I was going through. And it was so very helpful. And at the end of my journaling, at the end of the 6.5 weeks, I thought that I would give the pages to my husband and my friends who had been so kind to me, and then we'd have a bonfire, and that would be the end of the pages. We did have the bonfire, actually went to the Goodwill and got some really funky bras that became part of the fire, just to kind of celebrate the whole theme. And but my friends and Tommy said, why don't you see if you can get this story out there? It might help somebody. And I know that when I was diagnosed, I went to my library in town and I put in the search finder books on radiation. And I got books on Hiroshima, and I got medical radiation books. And I'm somebody who wants a tour guide. If I'm going to go to Virginia Beach, I want to get the tour book first. I want to know where to go, what to see, what the locals like to do, what to eat, all that sort of thing. I wanted to know what this experience was going to be like. And so those of you who are out there thinking about what you're going through or what's bugging you about what's going on in the world right now, think about what kind of a guidebook you can write for someone else about that experience. If you're dealing with something medical, if you're dealing with something social, if you're dealing with just, something that you've grown up with or something that you see in your community, write about it. And this really helped me every single day to write about it. It was my first experience getting a book out there that people responded to in a different way than they did with my fiction. With my fiction, people would come up and say, oh, I liked a polka, or I like pierogies, or I like ponies. I wrote a whole novel about a pony farm. And, but with this one, they would come up and say, I've been through this, or a friend's going through this, or I lost someone to this. And this book made me think, or this book made me consider that in a different way. And I was very, very grateful. I did continue to go back to fiction. The book that I had put on hold when I was going through cancer was about a palm reader in a dead mall. We all have dead malls around us, so make a wish but not for money is something a palm reader in New York City once told me as I went into a place, and she said, give me your palm, and then she said, make a wish but not for money. And I said, I'm going to write about a palm reader in a dead mall. And so that's sometimes all I need, just that little, almost like a TV guide synopsis. Suzanne speaks to ODU Literary Festival and can't believe what happens. And if that idea excites me, I just go on and I write a little bit every day for maybe, as long as it takes to write at least 2 pages. So sometimes that's a morning, sometimes it's 35 minutes, and things can happen. So because of the book, my book on my cancer experience, I started getting asked to do workshops with people who were going through various forms of illness and various challenges. And I began to realize that was something in my kit. And I want to just talk a little bit about a program I did. We had a tornado about 10 years ago pass through this area, 35 miles of destruction. And from Western Mass to Central Massachusetts. And I thought, I was going to, it was not my town, I'm really happy to say, but I'm really sorry for the surrounding towns that were hit. And my husband and I would go and help drag branches out of people's yards and all this. And I said, what I'm a lot better at helping people to write. So I offered a free workshop. That was in June. I offered that fall when people, had their wits about them a little bit more, at least. I asked the library if I could just do a free workshop on the tornado experience that I had not gone through, but I wanted to give a space for people to share that. That grew into a 6-week series in another town that was hit, and that culminated into Writers on the Storm. And I'm going to read a little bit about this, this collection that we put together from the people who met every week for about 6 weeks to write about their experiences. And very often, as is the case in this kind of work, writing about things that they had never even told their family. So I wrote at the beginning, there is holiness to be found at a table to which people willingly bring their lives' stories. When all those memories carried invisibly every day are brought into a room full of strangers and spilled out in phrases, in sentences, in paragraphs, in full chapters and verses, souls can be bared, risks definitely taken. At the table at which writers and poets who contributed to this book began their work, the writing initially was relayed with trepidation, but was received with words of appreciation and acknowledged by smiles that encouraged, heads that nodded, and hearts that bore the understanding of a group of people who weren't using cliche when they responded, I know just how you feel. So for me to meet with those writers and to do that work was really just kind of a loving experience to be in on. I didn't have that personal experience, certainly was in the geographic area, but it was something I know how to do. And as my mom said, I'll remind you, you don't know what you can do until you try. So what can you do when you see something going on? Again, I went to that library. I said, I'm happy to come here. And if you have this, conference little meeting area, we can use it as a space for people to come and write about their experiences with the tornado. And so since then, I have been writing with a lot of people with different experiences. I've also had my radar out for things in my world that I felt were important, that I wanted to know others about, to let others know about. A couple of those here, I write for Yankee Magazine, which is a regional magazine up in this part of the world. And it's a wonderful magazine that when it was in 1991, I had my first story. I have my same editor, the wonderful Mel Allen, ever since. And so I wrote to Mel and I said, there is a farm down the street from me, and it is one of the very few places that takes in retired, disabled, and homeless working horses. So think carriage horses, think farm horses, think police horses. Very often those are so large, it's not something that you can say, well, your work is done, we're just going to put you on this farm. It's not for everybody to care for a really large horse. Down the street from me, there was a former dairy farm. All of a sudden it became a sanctuary for working horses. And I had that down the street from me for about 10 years and ended up writing this piece called The Promised Land about Blue Star aquaculture. When the great working horses who clear our land, plow our fields, and pull our carriages in city parks grow old, their future can be bleak unless they find themselves at a special farm in Western Mass. And that's what I wanted to tell people about, because I not only saw how it took in the equine members of its community, but also people who went there, be they veterans, be they teens, be they parents looking to do something with their kids, be people who just wanted to get to know another kind of a creature. We had people being changed and healed there all the time. And I'm going to read just a little bit from that. And this is the very start of that piece. On a late summer Saturday morning, a truck pulling a silver horse trailer slows to a stop in front of a big red barn in a small Western Massachusetts town. Two men step from this cab and stretch away the miles they've just driven from a carriage stable in downtown Philadelphia. They walk to the back of the trailer and swing open the door. Inside, a newly retired carriage horse, Sam, a quiet 20-year-old chocolate-colored Belgian cross, shifts his 2,200-pound self. He sniffs the air. He swishes his docked tail. He knows he's somewhere different. He doesn't yet know what soon will be very clear, that here he will become part of a herd, perhaps become part of a horse-powered farming effort, part of transport and teaching efforts, maybe even go on to enjoy a perfect match with an adopted family. All are shining alternatives to the more typical fate of aging or ailing draft horses whose massive size and weight mean more meat on the bone, thus more money for kill buyers, who purchase an estimated 180,000 American horses annually for slaughter. Sam could live another 15 years, maybe more, and he'll start those next years here, where he'll be loved and appreciated and safe, where he will be home. So when I have an idea that I'm jazzed about, like the horses that I so love, and that I would ride my bike up to help and work with, the writing goes really easy for me. All I need is that one idea. Maybe you can relate that you overhear something, or somebody says, did you know last night this thing happened? Or did you hear about? And it's something you can't get out of your head. And that's how some of my bigger stories have happened. I wrote a book about, This is Paradise, is about a clinic in Malawi, which is a South Central, in a country in South Central Africa, not in South Africa, but just a little bit above. And there's a woman from Ireland whom I met as she was raising funds here in the States. And she started a clinic in Malawi in memory of her son who drowned there when he was 25. And I got to know more of her story which included that she was a guidance counselor. She had no background in medicine, really. This was the third child she had lost, and she had 2 surviving children, and she had moved to Malawi to run this clinic. And I said to Tommy, and I hope you all have someone to bounce your ideas off, because very often I'll say, hey, I met this person, or I heard this, or did you know this thing happened yesterday? And Tommy will say, you should write about that. And so I told him I had met this woman, and I told him a bit of her story. And I said, I think it would be a good magazine story. And Tommy said, no, I don't think so. And I got really disappointed. And he followed it up with, I think that's a book. And actually became a book. And This is Paradise tells of the story of Mags Reardon, who is from County Kerry, Ireland, who now lives in Malawi. And I'm going to read you a little bit about the scene at the Billy Reardon Memorial Clinic, which is named after her son. Prior to the opening of the Billy Reardon Memorial Clinic in 2004, the dirt road that enters town, which is Cape Maclear in Chembe Village, right on Lake Malawi, that dirt road equaled death for many locals in need of medical care. The nearest hospital is in the village of Monkey Bay, 11 miles down an often twisting and completely corrugated road that can partially disappear beneath torrents during the November to April rainy season. While a 35-minute trip might be relatively easy to make in parts of the world where public transportation awaits on most corners, or where few homes are without at least one vehicle waiting in the driveway, this sprawling village of 15,000 people includes only 5 automobiles and has no public transport affordable for villagers. With home remedies or a traditional doctor session being the limits of healthcare in a region having only 1 doctor for 800,000 people, infection from a simple cut could easily turn fatal and further underline the country's median age of 17 and a life expectancy the World Health Organization estimates is 57 or 58 years. I went to Malawi as part of the 4 years I spent researching this. It was 10 years ago at this time. I was in that village for a month, and I got to see and hear and smell and feel what it was like to live there for a time, and to really follow on the heels the woman I was writing about. This book is not about me. I'm not in here, but my enthusiasm for what one person can do in this world is. And I love being able to use my writing to get that out there. And but that doesn't mean that, I'm also not writing about a million other things. One of my most recent efforts was co-editing Soap Opera Confidential, which is the subtitle, Writers and Soap Insiders on Why We'll Tune In Tomorrow as the World Turns Restlessly to the Guiding Light of Our Lives. And it's about 24 essays from writers who also are soap opera fans, as I am. And if I weren't talking with you right now, I'd be watching The Young and the Restless, because almost whatever you're going through, the people in Genoa City always have it worse. So that's my lunch break usually. So I write before that. I take my lunch with Genoa City and hang out a little bit in Bold and Beautiful afterwards. And then around 2 o'clock, I get back to my work and conclude the day, maybe with a visit to my horse friends who at my friend's farm. I do my writing every day. If I don't, I feel like I'm losing that thread of the story. I work on multiple things at a time. I do teaching for Stonecoast MFA up in Maine, also for the Bay Path MFA in creative nonfiction, which is out here in Longmeadow, Massachusetts, but it's all online. And I'm really excited. In January, I'm going to start teaching in the very first class of the narrative medicine certificate that I created at the university with the help of my co-worker, Leanna James Blackwell. And we're very excited to offer this certificate. That's an opportunity for people to learn kind of what I've been talking to you here about, is how to take personal experience or interest in socio-political, medical things that are going on in our world, things that are affecting others, and putting that on the page, whether it's by interviewing people, whether it's by giving our own stories, whether it's by going out and living a story. And just, you know, I just really want to encourage you to see what you can do in the world. As my mom would say, you don't know if you can't try. So that's a little bit about what I've tried to do. What I think I'll do is now pass it on to the question and answer portion of our event here. I have lots more to say, but I want to make sure that there's time for everyone's questions. So I know I'm going to be joined. Hi, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. That was wonderful. Wow, you're just so prolific and so interested in so many different things. Thank you for sharing that sampler with us. I'm joined here by Renee and of course by Luisa Igloria, my co-director. So we're excited to have some questions in our chat box here, in our Q&A box. If anybody in the audience has a question, please put it into that QA box. And we're excited about having that conversation. So Renee, did you want to kick it off?
Well, I want to say thank you so much, Suzanne. It's just a pleasure to hear you read and the stories behind some of your books. I was hoping for a slice of shelf life, but maybe we'll have time before the end of things for a little snippet there. And I'm a little shocked, I'm not shocked, but to realize that I would be past life expectancy were I living in Malawi.
Me too.
There is one question from an audience member, Megan Alberson, who has asked, early on in your writing, especially fiction, were you ever nervous to share that?
Hi, Megan. Thank you for the question. And I hope your own work is going well. And I would say, it was all scary at first because I came from writing for a newspaper, and whatever folks are telling you, the people that I've always worked with and the people that I know in the business don't make stuff up. So I was not making things up for my daily job. And it was very strange to put on a page things that were just kind of like, all right, I'm setting it here, but I can just have anything happen. And because I was setting it in my hometown too, it's not named, but it's a very identifiable. And I thought, what am I doing? But I also thought, well, where is this going to go? Again, I thought it would be a short story, my very first one. And when it turned into a book, I said, well, what the heck? This will never happen again. Then it kept happening. And I'll encourage you just to take that chance. If you have something that, if your topic is a little more tough, and my books, I like to think they're serious characters, but they're more on the, it's more character based, not situation based. So if you're writing something where the situations are a little bit tougher, you might have to be a little bit braver. But I've always, I love dogs. I've just kind of overfed my dog for the afternoon. So he'll be very, he's very content out there. But, he's cooperating. But I always think of when I have puppies, and I would say like, be the puppy. And the puppy goes like, oh, what the heck is this? I'm going to go over here. So I'm like, oh, fiction, I'll try this. And all this, I'm going to try this. And one reason is because who hasn't at this point in life, been struck by some kind of loss. And I've just survived some people. And I realized we don't know how much time we have. So I had to just say, what the heck, I'm going to put it out there. I want to do this. And, whatever happens, happens. And it's been mostly a really great experience. So, try to be brave, whatever is your personal thing that might be stopping you, and realize that, you're here for a reason. Maybe telling that story is one of them. Thank you.
Oh, that's an amazing mantra to adopt. I guess we should all be the puppy.
Be the puppy.
Yeah, there is a question here, Suzanne, from Bernardo, who wants to know, were you always confident about your writing skills? And if not, how did you build that confidence?
Hi, Bernardo. Thank you so much for asking the question. I love that question because I think, I've been at this, it's 25 years, 26 years since my first novel came out, which means it can smoke and get married in all kinds of, states and all this. It's old enough to do whatever the heck it wants, but it's still out there doing its thing. And I feel that the person I was when I wrote that, again, just beginning in all this, I still have a form of that. I think any creative type has that form of like, oh, this really is not that great. I'm a fan of the work of Albrecht Durer. So if you don't know his work, look him up. Lived in like around 1500. I've got a print of his upstairs. And the reason I have the print is because I told one class so much that his paintings are so gorgeous, but he called himself the dissatisfied master because anything he painted, he'd go like, this is crap, and just throw it aside. And they'd say, wait, Albert, you're so great. And he didn't think it, but I don't think we can see the light we have in ourselves and put it out there, Bernardo, and see what people are thinking. I thought at the beginning, I'm just doing this for a lark, but then it took off, and it is the reason I get to sit home in my really beat up slippers, like I'm wearing this most of the day. Well, who isn't right now, probably. But, I'll say one thing, if you're raising kids or kids, if you don't have somebody in your life like this, be that person. Be the person who sees yourself not drawing Carl Yastrzemski correctly and not spelling his name right and saying, you know what, that's okay. I love that you did this. Do more of it. So say that to your kids, say that to anybody who's trying something creative. Even say, be your own cheerleader. Cause like, I'll tell this story and people will say, well, that's really great, but I didn't grow up like that. And I said, you have to be your own cheerleader along with the puppy. And just say to yourself, you know what, maybe that wasn't the best thing, but it's a step toward the next thing I'm gonna do. Thank you.
Speaking of which, one of the writers who was with us earlier in the week talked about, returning to the joys of childhood, those sort of simple pleasures of childhood, one of which is enthusiasm for things like puppies. But Timothy has a comment and a question. He says, hello, Suzanne. I really enjoyed your detailing of growing up in a Catholic household. Your detailing of your parents reminded me of my own grandmother, who has been very supportive of my own endeavors. That being said, did your Catholic upbringing, specifically those benefits relating to, specifically those beliefs relating to Catholicism, affect how you coped with suffering and the grit of the world?
Well, thank you, Timothy. I love that you have a relative, a grandma in common, kind of with that vibe, and that's a great gift to have had. Hope you still have her. I would say, I no longer practice that faith. But what I took from it is that that hope in, that we're all in this together and that there is somebody driving this train, even in the crazy places it's going. And so, while I feel faith-filled, what got me through the cancer experience was basically, like the religion of writing, if you will, because that's a practice. It's almost like going to your prayer space daily. If you're going to do that for whatever the 2 pages takes you, or as Alan Lamott says, if you can't do 2 pages, do 2 paragraphs, do 2 lines. That's how much farther it's going to put you ahead of all those other people who say, I don't have time for this. Well, no one has time for whatever, work it in. But I found that this became a prayer space. This is probably my most honest book, because I did not think anybody would see it. And it was personal. It was first person. It was about a time that I was not happy. I was depressed. I was not feeling well. I just had a real hard time. And I think being, taking my stuff to that place, you could see this, you could see your keyboard as like a metaphorical altar rail if you want, like I'm going to go here each day and this is where I'm going to do my stuff. And so I'll just throw in one thing about that upbringing is that it sparked a whole other book. So if anybody out there is interested in just exploring other religions, it can turn into work for you, because when Pope John Paul II died in 2007, and so here was our first Polish Pope, and it was a huge deal. And when he died, I was already out of the religion, but I was watching all the coverage and really feeling like oh, I can't share that. I would be there singing and praying in another lifetime. I would be there mourning this, but I feel differently now about it. And so then again, if you have something to bounce people off, you say, I said to Tommy, I really feel like I want to write something about how I'm feeling about, feeling like I can't be in that space of mourning. Not that I wasn't sad someone had died, but, just not feeling connected with that religion anymore. And Tommy said, you should write about that. And so I got this idea, and it turned into a year in which I went to a different Christian church every Sunday for a year. Every Sunday for a year from Easter of 2007 to 2008, and explored some of the 2,500 different, at least 2,500 different types of Christian churches there are in this country. And so sometimes it's just like, all right, you go from one experience to the other, and where does that lead you? And it's all these little flowers that open up into another idea. And ideas are something that, again, newspaper people have to have all the time. So I know I'm kind of going off here, but maybe I'm giving Timothy an idea of what he might write about. Thank you.
Let me just jump in quickly with a quick question. SR, thanks you for sharing part of your story, and ask, would you be willing to repeat the name of the Polish song from earlier? He'd love to, or SR would love to hear it.
SR, it's Jak szybko mijają chwile. The spelling is strange, but to someone who doesn't write out Polish words often, if SR wants to contact me on Facebook, I'd be happy to send a link to that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to sort of bundle two questions that have come from participants that might be related. One is about what writers you have read that have inspired or fueled your writing. And then the other is, you've referred to Tommy and referred to having someone to bounce ideas off, or a mentor. And do you think that that is pivotal or critical or necessary for a writer? And I would like to wed those with the idea that sometimes the writers we read are almost like mentors, but maybe that's a stretch.
Yeah, thank you. The second is mentor, and the first was, I'm sorry, the first
what writers have you read that have helped shape the way you write today?
Great, thank you. Well, if we weren't in the writing section of our home library here, upstairs I have fiction and nonfiction, and in there's a whole stretch of Roddy Doyle books. My husband's parents are from Ireland. He has a sister who lives there, and many years ago, she sent me a trilogy, the Barrytown trilogy by Roddy Doyle. And it was 3 books, Patty Clark, Ha Ha Ha, The Commitments, and the Snapper. I might have that wrong, but don't, but I look at this and I said, and I read about him, and I said, here's somebody who is writing about an experience they knew growing up in a town where they grew up and still live, but it's a fictional place. A lot of tour guides and taxi drivers have made money in Dublin by Americans getting in to the cab and saying, take me to Barrytown. It doesn't exist, but it's on those pages. And I was reading this guy's work and thinking, oh my gosh, this is a form of what I want to do. And maybe someday I'll have a box with like a trilogy in it. And he inspired me to use humor, to use those childhood experiences. If you read something like his recent book, Smile, which touches on the subject of the sexual abuse by priests scandal, which actually my husband, as a former journalist, spent 6 years researching in our area here in Western Massachusetts. You see that, he can do a range of things. He's got YA, he's got plays, he's got teleplays, he's got an opera. It's an amazing body of work, but I've learned so much from Roddy Doyle, and I really, really feel that, people can be your mentors by just taking them off the shelf. If I were married to a plumber, I would hope I would have a really nice plumber guy, but it's really handy that the guy I wrote the nasty letter to when I was in high school turns out to be my husband. He's as enthusiastic and caring as ever, and really supportive. But, you know, if you can find somebody, maybe they're not in your house, maybe they're in a writing group online, maybe they're on a book you pull from the shelf. I have learned so much from Anne Lamott. I love her fiction, her nonfiction. For 15 years at Bay Path here in near here in Longmeadow, I did a class on bird by bird, and this is my really marked up, really, you know, I've got like all kinds of prompts written in here. I used bird by bird for 15 years in an undergraduate creative writing course. She was reading once in Boston. I was teaching at Emerson College at the time. And so I got there 4 hours early to save the front row in the reading for my students. And so they let me, Bookline Brooksmith let me sit in the front row and wait for these 4 hours. And when she came in, she was so kind to all my students. And I went up there, it's the only time I've met her. I had her sign my computer. And I look at that still, and it's almost faded, but it's just, you know, she was so encouraging that day and so kind, and took time to spend time with my students. And I sent her after that a $25 check for peanut butter, because she helps make sandwiches. At the time, she was helping make sandwiches for a meal program at her church. And I, like 2 years later, got the check back, and she said, I found this on my desk and it's probably bad by now. Thank you for sending it to me. And I'm like, oh, she's, not only does she write to me, but she's as disorganized as I am. So it gave me, you know, like she's as organized. If you can, but she gets stuff done. If you can see her documentary, it's about 50 minutes long. I don't know, it's called Bird by Bird. It's really, it's so old that her child, who now has made her a grandmother, is about maybe 6. And she's writing on a typewriter like the size of your car or a computer. So, but there's so much wisdom. And I just, I love just learning from really wise women writers. And I just, you know, hope to continue that on. Eleanor Lipman, who is my mentor, the mentor I have in person, Tommy was writing about her when he was at the newspaper. He was doing a feature on her second book. I believe she has about 10 books out now. And he's the one who got the whole thing rolling. When he met with her, he said, you know, could my wife and I have lunch with you someday? She was kind enough to say yes. She lived about half an hour from here at the time. And we met with her, but I was too afraid to talk to her because she was somebody who had written a book, and I didn't know anybody like that. And I said, she said, well, oh, you wanted to chat about something today? And Tommy said, Suzanne's writing this short story that got really long. And she said, oh, gee, Tommy, you know, the few times we've talked, we seem to have the same taste for writers. Maybe you could send me some, Suzanne. I'm just looking at her like I could hardly talk. I sent it to her. She read 2 pages and decided she was going to send it to her friend who was an agent and her own editor. And when I finished the book in a year, they both accepted me. So that's somebody who came out of the blue and changed my life, and it's still rolling. So I always try to do, if I can do a little bit for somebody, and I hope I've sparked some enthusiasm and interest today.
So much wisdom. Thank you so much. And before we close, I just would like to offer from 2 of our audience members, Linda, and I forget who the other one was, they offer the observation that it's also very important to you to look back, to move forward. And the other audience members said, thank you for giving the confidence to explore themselves further in writing. So we have come to the close, unfortunately, of this wonderful program with Suzanne. I just love the way that we have glimpsed those worlds you brought to us in your fiction and in your nonfiction, probably especially because of the ways you trace them to their origins, where it's as if the seed for the story first dropped into your hand and something magical came from something that was very ordinary right where we were. So thank you again for being in our literary festival. Thank you so much, Renee Olander, for bringing Suzanne to us. And friends, please come back for our final literary festival program at 4 p.m. today, featuring the wonderful poet and essayist, Amy Nezuko-Matatil. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so grateful.
You.